The outline of the talk, serpent symbolism, serpent worship and its significance, was already given by Sri Venugopal. What I intend to do in the next 20 minutes to half an hour is this. 3 points. First is, look at the various occurrences of serpents, dragons or related creatures in the mythology, culture, architecture and iconography of the various nations which are separated by space, by time, across the world. That's point number 1. Secondly, merely pointing out to serpent and dragons and their occurrence will not help us. We'll have to see certain peculiar similarities, commonalities which are present, though very cleverly masked in these various cultures. And thirdly, finally, we will speak about the science of symbolism and see how, with the help of the science of symbolism, we can see that the mythology of not only Indian traditions but also other nations have a common origin and they are profoundly meaningful. Without the science of symbolism, all our mythology, iconography, especially to the Indian mind of today, which is highly materialistic, all the mythology and iconography appears quite superstitious. But an attempt will be made to show, however poorly, that there is deep meaning and knowledge which is hidden in our myths and temple architecture and so on. So first let's begin by what is close to our home, which is the Hindu philosophy or the Hindu iconography and mythology, where we find the mysterious beings called Nagas. Now, these Nagas are not serpents. Nagas are defined as a class of mythical semi-divine beings, half human and half cobra. They are always said to, have the ability to morph themselves into various shapes. They are always associated with places of water, such as the sea, the river, or a lake. And they are associated with being under the ground and associated with precious gems. They are strong, handsome species who can either be wholly human or they can transform into wholly serpentine form. These are some of the things which come quite commonly in our scriptures. They live in Nagaloka, Patalaloka, and we all have come across the story of Arjuna going into Patalaloka, Nagaloka, and then meeting Ulupi. And then Ulupi has a very powerful gem called Nagamani, right? So they are always associated with resplendent palaces, beautifully ornamented with precious gems. The reason these are specifically highlighted in the slide here is, you will find these things recurring, very uncanny recurrence of these ideas across the world. So these recurrence, the idea is to show that because of these recurrence, there seems to be one common origin from which all of these have sprung. Not only the Indian, but also the other parts of the other cultures of the world. Next we find Ananta Sesha. Now these are only by way of example. If you go to your own mythology and study them, you will find hundreds and hundreds of instances of snake-like beings. Some of them are listed here. The next, this being Ananta Sesha. It is said that Mahavishnu, he, sleeps on Ananta Sesha, and the story goes that The story goes that if Ananta Sesha uncoils himself, then time moves. And then creation begins. At the same time, at the end of the cyclic period of time, when Ananta Sesha recoils back, then universe ceases to exist. Sesha itself is a very interesting term. Our friend here who knows Sanskrit very well can confirm that Sesha means a remainder, right? Something that remains. So when the meaning that is given to this is, when a universe comes into existence and goes back, there is something that remains. That remainder becomes the basis for the next universe. Just like in our life, the basic idea is we all come back to life again and again, and this is not the first time. This is not the first time that we are in a human body. After every life, there is something that remains as a part of the life that we have lived, and that becomes the basis for our next life. So, our subsequent lives, the events of our life, are all the result of the causes that we have generated in the present and the past. That is one idea that we can gather from this idea of Sesha, remainder. Next we find Vasuki. This photo is taken from one of the airports in Bangkok probably, Bangkok, where Vasuki is shown and Samudra Manthan is happening. We all know the story of Samudra Manthan, let's not go into it, but here we find the prevalence or the occurrence of serpents. Next is Thakshaka. We all know the Hindu story of Thakshaka, but even in the Chinese and Japanese mythology, Thakshaka is considered as one of the great dragon kings. It is said that when Lord Buddha began his first sermon, 8 great dragons came from various places. They all gathered, and they were the first beings who heard the first sermon of Buddha, and with them they brought, each one of them, thousands of devotees. So we find Thakshaka mentioned in Chinese and Japanese mythology also. Now when the scripture says that Thakshaka came along with Nanda, Upananda, Vasuki, Balavan and so on, and they are called as the dragon kings, we should not imagine that there are actually dragons physically or serpents physically who came there. We should consider them as symbolical, as allegorical. Allegory means a story or an event which has a hidden meaning to it. Your Mahabharata is allegorical. Ramayana is allegorical. Read from the science of symbolism, each of the character of Mahabharata, whether he is on the Kaurava side or the Pandava side, and each of the weapon that he uses, the name of the character, his characteristics, each one of them become profoundly significant, and they open up a branch of knowledge, whether it is knowledge about the human being, knowledge about the cosmos, or any of the branches of knowledge. It opens up it gives the keys to these branches of knowledge as it was encoded by ancient sages. Next we find Shiva. Shiva has serpent all around his body, on his head, on his neck, on his hands, everywhere. If Shiva has serpent all around himself, his sons are not far away. We find that Ganesha not only has a serpent tied around his extremely large stomach, so that whatever he has taken inside doesn't spill out. He also has a particular form which is given on the left side, which is he's doing a nritya on the serpent. He also sits guarded under the shadow of a 5-headed serpent. There is a seven-headed serpent on which he dances. He does a Naga Nritya just like Krishna does. There is also a five-headed iconographical representation of Ganesha. His other son, Shiva's other son, Karthikeya, also is symbolized with a serpent. If Shiva gives reverence and respect to the serpent, you find Karthikeya, Subramanya, a kind of suppressing the serpent or subjugating the serpent. So within the same family of Shiva and his sons, we find two aspects of serpent. There are two aspects of serpents. Then we've come to the famous Kaliya, that venomous serpent in the river Yamuna. And we all know the story. Krishna is playing with his friends. They find this serpent dribbling poison and then poisoning the whole atmosphere. All the three worlds are being poisoned by him. And then Krishna dives into Yamuna and then suppresses him. He does not kill it, which is very significant. He can only banish this serpent Kaliya from the Yamuna river into a specific place which present day people identify as Fuji Islands. Ulupi, the story of Arjuna, who meets Ulupi and she takes him to Nagaloka, and then Arjuna dies and then Ulupi resurrects Arjuna using Nagamani, precious gem. Next we come to this particular sage who is the founder of the yoga philosophy, Patanjali. The story is that Patanjali is a avatar or a descent of the first serpent that we saw, which is Ananta Sesha. The story is very beautiful. We have to recollect it. It goes something like this, that all the sages and the gods go to Vishnu and say, "Dear Lord, now you came to the world as Dhanvantri and you gave us all the medicines that are required, all the nutrition that are required for the health of the body. You did your purpose. We followed all the laws that are given in your Vidya, Dhanvantri Vidya. But still we find that we always have disease, we always have troubles of the body and then problems in our body. What is the reason for this?" Vishnu's answer is very interesting. He says, "My friends, you think the diseases of your body arises only from your body? It arises because of your mind. And therefore, since there are causes of sorrow, suffering and ignorance in your mind, which has to be rectified for your body to be healthy also, therefore I will send Ananta Sesha as Patanjali, who will give you that philosophy which will rectify the defects of your mind, therefore from which you can have not only a healthy body, but what is more important, a healthy mind. The mind being much more superior to the body." So in this very beautiful story, there is so much lesson for us. We who are constantly involved in taking care of merely the body, taking care of the luxuries of the body, the needs of the body. As Socrates says, the body leaves no time to philosophy. The body, it demands so much of your attention every moment of your waking and probably even your sleeping time, that it leaves no time for your higher pursuits, higher philosophy. So the focus should be on our moral, on our ethical, on our mental nature, and there if we rectify the causes, the health of the body is a consequence of that. That's something that we can gather from the story of Patanjali. If you notice the iconography, there is 5-headed serpents, there are 7-headed serpents, 5 and 7 and 3, 3, 5, 7 being very significant and recurrent across all systems, like we will quickly see. Indian temple architecture, serpents everywhere. Buddhism, you come to Muchalinda, when Buddha is about to attain enlightenment, he is attacked by the fiercest of the weapons that the evil demon Mara can wield against Buddha. At that time, it was a serpent which came to the rescue or support of Lord Buddha. So Muchalinda is that serpent which is in this park there, in the figure there. He is guarding Buddha. Cosmology of Buddhism also has something very interesting regarding serpents. They say that the four corners of the world, north, east, west and south, is guarded by special classes of beings. They say that there are hierarchies of intelligences which are present in the four corners of the world, and each one of them have a specific duty. And these duties they perform and dispense justice according to the law of karma. It's not like they do out of their own whims and fancies, and then you can pray to them and do some mistake, do some error, and then pray to them and erase your mistakes. But there is always Virupaksha, as they say, the king of the West, one who sees everything. Virupa Aksha, one who sees everything. And he is symbolized as a snake. He is symbolized as a snake. His followers are Nagas in the cosmology of Buddhism. You also find the two greatest followers direct followers of Buddha, Moggallana and Sariputta. These both were called as the great serpents, the great dragons. Nagarjuna, it is said, was given the great sutra, Prajnaparamita Sutra, by a dragon which had hidden it, or a serpent which had hidden it deep inside the lake. When Nagarjuna came, it saw that he is somebody who is worthy of this kind of knowledge. Therefore, it took it from the bottom of the lake and then presented it to Nagarjuna. But if Naga Arjuna, and Moggallana and Sariputta, there is serpent so much mentioned in a positive sense, referring to wisdom, knowledge, and great beings who have progressed far beyond the present average consciousness of man. In the same Buddhism, you also find the other aspect of serpent in what is called as the wheel of existence, Bhavachakra. In this center of this wheel of existence, the wheel of samsara, there are three animals which are at the very hub, which are at the very root. One is a pig, referring to moha. Another one is a rooster, referring to raga or greed, attachment. And then comes the serpent. You see the serpent prior to this, they were all positive. Then you also find the serpent which is mentioned in the negative, which has a negative connotation, referring to hate, aversion, ill will. And the Buddhist philosophy is summed up in this Bhavachakra. If you go to any Buddhist temple, you will invariably find Bhavachakra mentioned there. Or go to Google and find the image. You will find at the center of this wheel of samsara are these three things. And the philosophy is you are revolving in rebirth again and again because you are feeding these three animals, the pig, the rooster and the serpent, the poisonous serpent. Next, going to Jain philosophy, you find Parshvanatha, the 23rd of the Tirthankaras. Each of the Tirthankara having a specific special symbol which shows what Tirthankara is. And Parshvanatha is symbolized by serpent. You find serpent above him, you find serpent below him, you find serpent everywhere. Go to any temple in Thailand there are serpents, there are dragons. Coming to China, it's full of dragons. There is, just taking the Chinese philosophy or just taking the Indian philosophy, we can talk about it for weeks together and still not exhaust the number of instances and the stories which revolve around dragon and serpent. But we will just recollect one or two of these very interesting Chinese myth of creation, the creation myth as they call it. They say there are two serpents, Fushi and Nuwa, and it is said these two dual serpents are the ones who created human beings. Either you can call them dual serpents or dual dragons. It's this duality, positive, negative, which created all the creatures on the earth, and therefore the Chinese pride themselves in calling themselves as the descendants of dragon. They say that the dragons rule the weather and water. Again, recurrence of water is something interesting, and that there are 5 dragon kings. They identify 9 sons of dragon, and so on and so forth. The deeper you go, the more you find the recurrence of dragon in Chinese philosophy. If it is dragon in China, it is serpent in India. You can almost equate these both. But this is not only about India, China, Buddhism and so on. Now look at this. The Australian Aborigines say that there is a great serpent called the rainbow serpent. Serpent with 7 colors. It came from beneath the ground and created huge ridges, mountains, gorges as it pushed upwards. And it is hermaphroditic, androgynous entity. What does this remind a student of Indian philosophy? It reminds one of Ardhanarishwara, hermaphrodite, dual forces. Just as the Chinese said that there are dual forces, which is the cause of all. So hermaphroditic, androgynous entity, which is of immense proportion. And again, look at the occurrence of water. It inhabits deep permanent water holes. It is in control of the most precious resource, which is water, and an ultimate creator of everything in the universe. Now, where is China? Where is India? Where is Australia? If you go on mapping these, like we will do in the next 5 or 10 minutes, we will find that the whole of the world is populated by tremendous stories about serpents and dragons. Next, consider the Fiji story. Fiji also worship the snake god. They call it Ratumai Bulu. I hope the pronunciation is right. It comes from Bulu, the world of spirits. He is the one who makes breadfruit and other fruit trees blossom and yield fruit. He is a god of great importance and presides over agriculture. If this is not sufficient, we will go to the Mayan, the Incan, the Aztec, basically the South American traditions, and it is probably here that you find most commonality with the Indian serpents, as well as very rich information in terms of symbolism mentioned in their scriptures. This is their greatest god. They call it Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl translates to the feathered serpent. He is a god of wisdom. The god of wisdom. He is born to a virgin named Chimalman, to whom God on Teol appeared in a dream. A god appearing in a dream and a virgin birth is something which you find quite common in various cultures, which predated Christianity by many millenniums. So it's not something new that you find in Bible. Again, look at the similarity between the Virupaksha of the Buddhist system and Quetzalcoatl. Quetzalcoatl also is one of the 4 sons of his father, and each one of them preside over one of the directions, north, east, west or south. And he also presides over the west, just like Virupaksha presides over the west in the Buddhist cosmology. So he is a kind of South American Lokapala. He is a South American Virupaksha. he has a brother. We find this duality everywhere. If there are Pandavas following virtue, you also find from the same family branch, there are Kauravas. The good and the evil can never be separated, just as the positive and the negative can never be separated. You separate one from the other, the universe collapses. Centrifugal forces. They always must remain in a balance, must work in a certain kind of harmony, rhythm for the universe to exist. So this fellow, Quetzalcoatl, the god of wisdom, has a twin brother who is a god of monstrosities. The sinister god of monstrosities. He's a canine brother. So he brings misfortunes, he brings sickness, deformities, all the problems in your life arises from Xolotl, who is a twin brother of the god of wisdom and the god of auspiciousness, who is Quetzalcoatl. So this kind of duality you find in the Ophite philosophy, the Gnostic Ophites. Ophis itself means serpent, and they recognized two serpents again. Ophis, the good serpent, Ophiomorphos, who is like a shadow of the good serpent, who becomes evil. Agathedemon in the Greek philosophy, again, who is a beneficent good serpent, the god of wisdom, and his twin brother, the evil genius, the malevolent spirit. So the duality of the serpent you find here also. In fact, the psychologists of today identify a specific kind of mental disorder called cacodemia. Cacodemia is when a person feels that he is possessed by an evil spirit. He is convinced that there is an evil spirit, a shaitan, which has possessed him, and they call it cacodemia, which comes from this word, cacodemon, of the Greeks. Now go to the Egyptian. You find there also, though their gods of wisdom and gods of auspiciousness use serpent over their hood to represent something significant, they also have this other serpent called Apep, a kind of giant serpent which embodied chaos, and thus he was the opponent of light, Maat, which is order or truth. As it says in the Rig Veda, it is Rita, order. The opposite of order is this fellow, Apep, the disorder, chaos. And the beautiful story is that every day sun tries to rise from the east in his chariot, like our Surya Deva in his chariot. The Egyptians say that the sun tries to rise in the east along with his entourage of protectors, and it is this Apep, the giant serpent, the malevolent serpent, who tries to swallow the sun. Sometimes he swallows the sun, but then the protectors of the sun, who are now within the stomach of Apep, cut through the stomach and then emerge out of it victorious. That's the story. And he is so big that he is called as a world encircler. He encircles the whole world. He is around the whole world. There is a certain darkness which has encircled the whole world. They called him as Apep. And just as Kaliya could not be completely destroyed by Krishna, but he was only banished from Yamuna river. Similarly, this is a malevolent force in the Egyptian philosophy, in the Egyptian system, who could never be entirely vanquished. You can only suppress it. You can only put him in its place, but not entirely vanquish him. This is very, very similar to the Scandinavian legends called the Midgard or the world serpent. They also speak of a certain serpent which is so large, so huge, and so malevolent that it has encircled the whole world. They also call it as the world encircler. So there is Egypt, and then there is Scandinavia, separated by space, separated by time, but speaking of the same thing. And they say when finally he has encircled the world, he has bitten his own tail and encircle the world, when he releases his tail and starts moving about, then there will be Ragnarok, or what we in India call as Pradaya. And then we find instances of taming the serpent or taming the dragon. We have the serpent taming, which we find the Kaliya, the Nritya, which Krishna does on the hooves of Kaliya. But look at the similarity that you find in the Scandinavian legends. We have the great god Thor. Some of us know Thor because we have watched movies about Thor, the recent ones. But Thor is a great god of power. He has a hammer, right? And then he goes to a fishing trip, just like Krishna goes to play with his friends to the banks of Yamuna. And there he finds this Midgard serpent, the world encircler. Midgard means basically the earth. The Scandinavians recognize the whole universe to be filled with 9 realms. They are all the 9 branches of the world tree, of which one of the branch is this earth. There are 8 other branches that they recognize, referring to various aspects of the universe. So this world, when I say this world, not only this earth, it means this physical realm of physics. They call this as Midgard, this earth. So there is this Midgard serpent which has encircled the earth, and then Thor finds him dribbling poison, just as Krishna finds Kaliya dribbling poison and then poisoning the whole water body there. Thor also finds the same thing, and then he fights him. There is a great struggle that goes on. He conquers this Midgard serpent, and he lifts his hammer to kill the serpent. He's dancing on the hooves of the serpent. He lifts his hammer to kill the serpent. At that time, something interesting happens. We'll not go into that, it's a long story. But then something interesting happens, and then the serpent escapes, such that just as Krishna forgave Kaliya and sent him off, so also we find Thor not able to completely vanquish or completely destroy this serpent, but he only goes away from that place. Quite similar. This vanquishing of serpent and dragon we find in the story of Indra versus Vritra. Vritra was also called as Ahi. Ahi means snake. So there is a venomous snake, there is a evil snake. Though there is a good snake in terms of Ananta Sesha, Patanjali and so on, there is an evil snake also. And he is killed by Indra using Vajra, just as Vajra, thunderbolt, or the hammer of electricity which Thor uses. Similarly, Indra uses Vajra, thunderbolt, to destroy Vritra, Ahi. And Zeus, the Greek philosopher, the god of Greeks, he also has a similar fight with Typhon, which is there on the right side. And he also kills the serpent, Typhon, using a thunderbolt. So what is this commonality? The more you comparatively study the myths, the more you find that there's something going on here. It cannot be just coincidental. Then we come to the Mayan cultural hero called Votan. He is said to belong to the lineage of charm or snakes. He established a kingdom called Nachan, the snake house. And the story goes about how he acquired wisdom. One day he was walking and he found a snake hole. He followed the snake hole deep inside, and it led him to the roots of heaven. And in the roots of heaven, he found wisdom. That he acquired, and therefore Votan became a great hero. The serpent was so important, so significant in the Aztec, Mayan, basically the South American culture, that they went on to represent it with great pains. They constructed great pyramids in South America to represent this. Look at this Chichen Itza in Mexico. During the spring and autumn equinoxes, twice a year, the sun strikes the northwest corner of the pyramid in such a way that it casts a series of triangles. If you see here, there are steps there and the sun is falling on one side and the shadow is cast on the railing below which is the mouth of the snake. This happens only twice a year. They had such perfect knowledge of astronomy, alignment of stars, alignment of the sun, that they were able to design these, and they went to such great lengths to represent serpent. It cannot be because they are just superstitious. It cannot be just because they didn't have any better work to do, so they took all the slaves and made them do this. It is because serpent and dragon is extremely significant that they went to these great lengths to do this. And on these 2 days of the year, exactly on those 2 days, the equinoxes, you find the serpent being formed on the railing of the steps. And then we have something interesting in the US, the serpent mound. It's one of the largest effigy mound. It represents a snake eating an egg. Now, the alignment of this mound, which is 411 meters long, 1,348 foot, 3 foot high. Who made this? Nobody knows. There are some theories, hypotheses, but nobody clearly knows. And look at the alignment that is mentioned there. The oval to head area of the serpent is aligned to the summer solstice sunset. The coils being aligned to the 2 solstices, the 2 equinox events each year. Which, with such great knowledge of astronomy, they were able to design these things, not because they were merely superstitious. Then we finally come to the Serpent of Genesis, the serpent who is made into an evil character. Poor fellow. The only thing that he did was to give knowledge to Eve and Adam and said that take knowledge. Now, when somebody says take knowledge, we call them guru. Unfortunately, the political conditions in which the church was born was such that it had to be converted and made into an evil serpent. The serpent of Genesis was never meant to be an evil tempter. He was supposed to be a teacher who gave wisdom. In the Kabbalistic, Jewish, and the origins from which the Jews came, you find that serpent is greatly revered. And Jesus himself said, "Be thou wise as serpent and harmless as doves." So what we find as a popular interpretation of Bible is entirely different from the inner essence that is there and the intention of Jesus. So wherever you go, basically, across the world, you find serpents and dragons. That's the point. That's point number 1, accomplished. Point number 2, the similarities that we can find. Quetzalcoatl, the South American god, is a god of wind, Vayu. Kukulkan was also a winged serpent who flew to the sun, and in his great pride, he thought that he could speak to the sun, and then he gets his tongue burned and then comes down. Just as we have our own young Hanuman, who is the son of Vayu again, son of wind. You see the commonality, there is wind, there is flying, there is reaching to the sun, there is getting burned, there is coming back. Such commonality. It can't be merely coincidental. In the West, point number 2, in the West presides white Quetzalcoatl, the god of justice, light, mercy and wind in the legends of South America. In the Buddhist, they call Virupaksha presiding over the West. You find commonality in the West, whose symbol is a pearl, white, and he is the leader of Nagas. The Chinese call the white tiger of the West as the guardian of the West. So there is West commonality that you find in these things. And then the Scandinavian Thor, as we already mentioned, he, at the end of the whole manifestation, when everything is about to get into Pralaya, what they call as Ragnarok, he is able to kill the serpent, but he gets bitten by it. He gets bitten by it, and the legend says, the story says, he takes 9 steps backwards before he dies. Look at the number 9. And then you find Odin sacrificing himself to himself. Like we find in our Purusha Sukta, where Purusha sacrifices himself to himself and then hangs upside down the tree of life for 9 days and 9 nights. Chichen Itza, which we saw the photo, also has 9 steps which cast the shadow of a serpent. So the commonalities are this: water bodies, underground, jewels, gems, wisdom, teaching arts and sciences. The teaching arts and sciences part, I didn't make any slides, but if you go and research on these topics, you'll find that each one of these good serpents are shown to have come down and taught mankind all kinds of sciences, arts, architecture, religion, philosophy, and so on and so forth. So some thoughts occur to us, which is, it cannot be accidental, but it's a concurrent design. Concurrent design because all the myths have a common origin and a specific representation of the same knowledge in different cultures, symbols, and so on. There is an important lesson that we can learn the more we study these things, which is comparative study of philosophy. Yes, we can go deep into the religion that we are born in, but we will remain incomplete if we don't use the information that we have around us and do a comparative study of various other traditions, other systems, which will greatly broaden our mind. Some of the things that we don't understand in our own text, we find hints in either Scandinavian or Mesoamerican or the Chinese systems. The other thing is, merely comparative study is quite helpful, but there is some kind of occult understanding of symbolism that is necessary before we can understand these mythologies and iconographies and cultures correctly. Without this kind of inner understanding, worship of serpent merely remains an external ritual. So it makes one a better student of one's own, the religion in which he is born, but also makes us broad-minded to see the good that is there in all other traditions. So as Epicurus, the philosopher, said that what is the use of the words of a philosopher if it does not help, if it does not cure the suffering of a person? It is as good as the medicine given by a physician which does not cure the disease. Similarly, vain are the words of the philosopher which does not heal any suffering of a man. Now, in our today's context, we can paraphrase Epicurus with his permission and say this: vain is the ritual custom of any religion which does not show the spiritual part of us, the spiritual self in us, the spirit in us. Just as there is no profit in medicine which does not cure the disease of the body, similarly a ritual or a custom which cannot decipher, if we cannot decipher the hidden meaning in it, and shows how all the beings in this world are united, that there is a common origin for all beings, that there is a distinction only that we human beings make in terms of race, color, caste, religion, and so on. But just scratch the skin and then see deep inside, metaphorically, not literally also it works, but metaphorically certainly, you will find that all the laws of nature are the same, the origin of human beings are the same, we all arise from the same source, we all are here for the same grand purpose, and we are heading towards the great aim to be fulfilled by us in nature. So, this understanding, unless we get this understanding, which leads to some kind of brotherhood among all of us, we are considering what are the reasons to fight with each other. But a correct study of religion always shows how we can find commonality between us, how we can find that when one says in Arabic, another says in Sanskrit, another says in Hebrew, another says in some other language which the South Americans use, but they are all at the bottom of it. They are all speaking of the same language, which is the unity of life, the unity of self. Unless we do this, then the mere rituals that we perform remains actions of the body with no relevance to our life. So in the next 5 to 10 minutes, we will quickly consider some of these characteristics and then we will stop. There are two kinds of serpents and dragons that we saw. And one of the characteristics of serpent which is unique to it is that it sheds its skin. It sheds its skin. It keeps cyclically renewing itself, renovating itself, right? And then it is born from an egg. It also lays an egg. And there are various scales on its body. If you run this serpent characteristics through the lens of symbolism, you'll find something interesting. Let's try to see what are some of the meanings. It sheds its skin. The basic idea of this is that we are all, in our essential nature, immortal beings. Now we may call ourselves Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. So-and-so, I am an engineer, software engineer, this, that and other things. They are all only the external aspects of us, temporary aspects of us. This body, these emotions, these feelings, our desires, not only the physical body, there are other aspects of us, invisible aspects of us. They are all but temporary aspects of us, but we are like a serpent who take up a body, experience it, and then live it. Take up the body, experience it, and live it. Just like a serpent sheds its skin periodically. In fact, this is very graphically mentioned by Krishna in his second chapter of the Gita, where he says, just as at the end of the day, these are old garments, I can't use this again. So I remove these, and tomorrow morning I wear new clothes. Similarly, the self within each of us, which is the same in all, whose origin is the same self, it takes up bodies again and again. Next we find, in India especially, serpent is worshipped on the 5th day, right? It's on Panchami, Nagar Panchami. None of these customs are accidental or blindly decided by somebody randomly. Somebody woke up in the morning and said that today we will decide that it is the 5th day, therefore it is Nagar Panchami. It was not so. It was all carefully designed to pass on certain messages from generation to generation. If you write it in a language or write it in a book, all the theory of your philosophy, it will easily get lost. How many languages are dead? They are all gone, dead. Nobody speaks so many languages. The languages that we are speaking today, in a millennium or so, we can't guarantee that these languages will be there or in the same form. But if you symbolize them, if you symbolize your knowledge, if you codify your knowledge by customs, by traditions, by these beautiful stories which our own countrymen have retained and passed on from mother to daughter, father to son, grandmother to granddaughter, from so many ages, we find how knowledge has been codified using this great science of symbolism. Coming to Panchami, Venus has a special relation to Earth. The South Americans, Quetzalcoatl and all. Quetzalcoatl is called as the god of Venus, for example. Right? And number 5 is something specifically associated with so many interesting things, like we'll see in the next slide. But if you plot even astronomically, at what times Earth, Venus and Sun align with each other, it forms a pentagram. Every 8 years, there are 5 instances when Earth, Venus and Sun align themselves. In fact, the Mayans considered Venus to be more important than the sun. They studied Venus more than the sun. Coming to Panchami, the second part, right? One is there is astronomical significance to why serpent is closely connected with Venus and 5. We find our own Kumaras in our mythology, the 4 Kumaras, who all acquired wisdom at the age of 5. Again, the occurrence of 5, and forever remained 5 years old, eternally young, always 5. Narada says, though they are 5 years old, they are the ancestors of mankind. And this is something interesting. But the point I'm trying to make here is just the occurrence of 5 and significance with Panchami. The significance of 5 is because of this. We humans are not merely this body. The ancients recognized that there are other aspects in us which are far more important than this physical body. Now we have completely immersed ourselves in the body and have no idea of the other aspects of us. The most important aspect of us is what is called as manas. In the occult philosophy, it's called as the manas, which takes birth again and again, like a serpent sheds its skin and takes on new skin. So this manas was lit up in us like a candle which has latent fire, but lit up when another source of fire comes close to the candle lights up. Similarly, many ages ago, we became human beings, not out of arising by apes, not out of evolving out of apes, but the ancient philosophy says we all have a divine origin. We all are essentially eternal, but who have taken up abode in this body. So that message is conveyed through this number 5 because manas is the 5th principle. There are 7 aspects in us. Manas is the 5th principle. These are some of the only. This is not even the tip of the iceberg. Whatever we are trying to decipher here, or whatever we are trying to present here. Again, it swallows an egg. The serpent comes from an egg, and then it gives rise to another serpent through an egg. Pure law of cause and effect. Pure law of karma. The idea is that our whole life, all the events of our life, whether individually, as a family, or as a nation, is regulated and is the result of the causes that we have generated in the past. In this life or in the previous life, there are causes that we have generated which remain. That's the remainder. And in this life, as well as subsequently, a portion of those causes, those seeds, germinate and then gives rise to all our circumstances, surroundings, fortunes and misfortunes. So the ancient sages, the rishis, always laid responsibility in each of our own hand. They did not say, you will never find statements which will say that God will come and save you, or do this, do that, and God will forgive you. That will only be what the later developments in the religion has happened. But in the origin, you will find that great responsibility was laid in the hands of each one of us, because we are generating those causes for good or evil, individually as well as collectively. So we have responsibility towards each other. As a society, as a family, as a nation, as a human race, my individual actions affects others. Not only on the plane of this world, but especially on the plane of thoughts and feelings. They have deep impact on others. And we will be held responsible for the good or evil that happens to all others because of our character and our conduct. And then the scales of the body are the many aspects of truth. The various religions, various cultures, each one of them is fighting for supremacy. Each one of them wants to convert others into their view of thought. But we are like the different aspects of the serpent. We are like the different scales on the body of the serpent. And then there is something about duality. We will not go there. We will nearly reach the end of time. So symbolism is something like this. Without the occult hidden meaning, all our rituals become merely dead repetitions. Why was symbolism used? Why was these stories made? These traditions of Panchami, Nagar Panchami and all made? Because in these traditions, there are truths hidden about our own self and about the laws of nature. It's in a way a time proof. And it is said that there are 7 keys to symbolism which covers the entire universe, the visible and the invisible. And only one who has mastered all the 7 keys has complete knowledge or wisdom about the whole universe and about his own self. So these are some of the thoughts that we thought we would like to share with you. Basically to see how serpents and dragons are there across the systems, across all cultures, and then find some of the commonalities, and in a short time of 50 minutes to 1 hour, almost nothing can be covered about what this deep, meaningful symbol of serpent and dragon can symbolize. And then we try to decipher some of the meanings, like serpent shedding its skin, referring to how our own self, our own divine nature, is something which is shedding this body every birth and then taking it up again. So, in a way, in this tree of the body, we are the serpents. We are the serpents, not this name, not this form, but we, our real inner self, eternal self, we are the serpents. We are the serpents of wisdom. Why wisdom? Because all the experiences that we have gathered in our past, it is said, is stored in us. Nagas are shown as storing gems, and they are always underground. In our case, it's deep underground in this body. It is not evident. It is deep underground. Our knowledge, our wisdom, and the serpent itself, divine manas, is deeply hidden in this body. What is evident in the average human being today is not the divine serpent, but its shadow, which is the Xolotl or Cacodemon, the evil serpent. It is the evil in us which is more evident in us. So our duty is to recognize that there is that good serpent in us, whose 7 heads, or the 5 heads and the 7 heads, symbolizes 7 virtues. 7 virtues. The evil serpent in us, like the Kauravas, are 100-fold. There are so many evil tendencies in us. So there is a Kurukshetra going on within our own mind, between the good aspects of us and the evil aspects of us. So we should always make the right choice is a message, one of the messages that we can find in this symbolism. So we'll end here. Thank you very much.